the difference between Bitcoin and crypto is that Bitcoin starts as a valuable ledger, the system or the network, or a network of true information, 100% true, constantly verified to be true every 10 minutes, and that subsequently makes the token valuable. Whereas with crypto, it's like the other way around. It's an attempt by different teams, then it's already centralized, of course, but to empower a system, eventual system somewhere to exist with the use of a token. That's why they pitch the token and not the system. Yeah, what do you think about that?
That's a great one. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the big difference in the operative word between Bitcoin and crypto is decentralization. And that there's a lot to unpack there, right? It's sort of an obscure word. I think if you are a reader of Austrian economics or computer science, you probably have some familiarity with centralized versus decentralized networks. And the question might naturally arise, why does a decentralized network lend itself to be more conformant to truth, whereas the centralized networks tend not to be? I think if you even consider, capitalism, for instance, right, in the actual traditional form, where we're actually talking about free market capitalism. We're not talking about the crony fiat capitalism we see in the world today. That's not the case, because people are having their property rights violated left and right. It's not, to the extent people are having their private property rights violated, is the extent to which it's not a decentralized system. Decentralized would be that each individual market actor is able to make their own decisions, and they bear the consequences of those decisions in a very symmetrical way. All right. So they have rules. You can think about this in the sense of a game. When you have a game that has rules that are applied evenly to everyone and they don't change, well, that's a fair game, right? You can play, you can build a strategy. Any game by the way, any fair game you've ever played is this way, right? The rules don't change over time. As the old saying goes, you can't change the rules in the middle of a card game. Because once you introduce the authority to change the rules, then it's no longer a game. It degenerates into a political struggle. Like, people will basically fight over the power to make the rules, because the power to make the rules is to win. The power to win the game forever, basically.
Yeah.
So only in truly decentralized systems do you get this universally even application of rules. And this also gets into the word corruption, right? Corruption has an etymological origin related to the word rupture. And a rupture is when a membrane splits in two, right? That something splits the surface membrane and something comes out of it, right? People get a ruptured organ or a ruptured, muscle tissue, that something, literally the surface splits open and something spills out of it. Well, that's a separation, right? There's a separation. Something that was supposed to be held under one kind of surface membrane is now released. And so you get these two different surfaces interacting. And that is, in my opinion, the reason there's an etymological relation to the word rupture and the word corruption is because corruption is that. It's a two-tiered rule system, right? Rules for thee, not for me. This has also been called apartheid in Africa. And so when you have rules that are not applied evenly, you don't have a game anymore, right? It's very important. No, it's indispensable to a game that you have agreement on the rules and that the rules don't change. And if the rules do change, they need to change at the same time and be applied evenly to all. And they need to change not in the middle of a game. So, nature has there's kind of this decentralized game built into nature. It's like the game of evolution, right?
Yes, exactly what I was going to say. Nature.
If the adaptation works, right? If it helps you succeed in reproducing, well, then that feature, whatever it may be, right? A giraffe with a longer neck, a turtle with a harder shell, whatever the thing is, that adaptation will then propagate, right? If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, discard it. This is like the algorithm of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same algorithm that applies in capitalism, right? Where if a product works, as in it satisfies a consumer want better, faster, cheaper than the other options available, well, then people will buy it. People will prefer it. And this will create an incentive for producers to produce it. So you'll see that tool or technology spread. And so all of that progress, right, even in a very evolutionary biology sense or in a technology sense, they're both enabled by decentralized competition. If you introduce centralization to that, I guess in natural selection, that would be something like artificial selection, where, nature, the selection pressures introduced by nature are replaced by the selection pressures introduced by some tyrant, right? If, what's that meme where it shows the wolves like 100,000 years ago, and it says, hey, let's go get some food next to that campfire. What's the worst that could happen? And then it says 100,000 years later, and it shows these little designer dogs and party hats.
Licking your feet.
Yeah. And so that is the transition from natural selection to artificial selection, right? You've gone from decentralized, decentralized fitness feature discovery to centralized fitness feature discovery, right? So you go from this like wolf that's bred to hunt and kill and survive and have certain social bonds inside of the pack, and you go to this, you turn him into like a consumer toy for humans, right? When wolves are bred to become designer dogs. So that's just kind of one angle, I guess, on how decentralization is the way of nature and how centralization tends to corrupt it and make things that are very much less robust and much less fit for survival, right? If you imagine pitting a timber wolf versus a chihuahua, you get some sense of how much better decentralization is than centralization at creating things that are robust and anti-fragile.
And when I think about our fiat money world, even this week I saw a video of some guy from the ECB talking about their CBDC, and he is saying at a press conference with his title, no, it's not going to be programmable, or no, we're not going to see identity, or no, like this. And I just tweeted like, open source everything or shut the fuck up. It's just, we have come to accept the talk, not the walk, right? It's the same as the Bank of England saying like, the gold delivery is a bit slow because, sometimes we move the bullion and there's like numbers and the computer. I don't know. I don't know if you saw that press conference, but I was watching that and I was like, wow, if people still accept that, which I think shows where we kind of are in terms of, our resistance against the flaws of fiat money by the majority, which I definitely think we are not there yet, when you still see, stuff like that still working. So, and of course, then in Bitcoin, it is all walk, no talk, right? It's the whole proof of work thing permeates true Bitcoin, and it's rules, not rulers, and you can only benefit from the value that Bitcoin can bring when you adopt or when you comply with the rules, and you comply with the rules because all the other players comply with the rules, right? Like that.
Yes.
That I find a very interesting thought. Like you're forced to follow the rules from the start, basically.
In the sense of ultimate capital T truth, ultimate reality, right? That's beyond all concept, all understanding. We can just sort of see or comprehend different aspects of it. That capital T truth is never dependent on anything whatsoever. In fact, everything is dependent on it.
Yes.
Right?
The truth just is.
The truth just is, right? So the selection pressures, to go back to the Darwinian language, just are, right? They exist, right? You either can get the food or you can't, right? Which you either will survive or you won't.
Yeah.
So those selection pressures, to use like Descartes language, like they're objectively true, right? We're subjectively trying to
you can ignore it.
Subjective. Right. Ayn Rand. You're free to ignore the consequences of reality, but you are not free to ignore. I'm sorry. You are free to ignore reality, but you are not free to ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Is what she said.
It's like you're born as a little giraffe, and you're like, I'm not going to stand up. In the middle of the of the play. Yeah.
And then by natural selection, there won't be little baby giraffes that don't stand up. Exactly. Right? Because those that did not survive, and therefore they didn't propagate, and therefore they don't exist. Mm-hmm. So truth is real. Like it's almost, again, truth, reality. Like we use these terms almost interchangeably. There is some philosophical difference, but capital T truth, ultimate reality, everything is dependent on it. And like to give you a sense of how serious this is, when I say everything, again, we mentioned survivability obviously is dependent on it. How best do you conform yourself to what is true? That will determine your ability to survive. And, I love, on this particular point, I love Francis Bacon's quote that nature to be commanded must be obeyed.
I like that.
Actually, for the Wright brothers to fly, it wasn't a matter of them bending any rules or creating some independent structure. What they actually had to do was discover natural laws and then conform the technology to exploit, to take advantage of those laws, basically. I
wanted to say comply. They comply.
Right. They must comply. They must obey, to use Bacon's word, with these laws so that they can accomplish their aim of flight, right? Mm-hmm. Which may seem like something that's not, people might say, oh, well, that's not natural. You used a technology to exploit the mechanism of lift to create a machine that flies, and therefore you took the two-legged ape into the sky. But there is, and you could say, okay, maybe that's the line between natural and artificial is a very interesting one philosophically we can go into later, but suffice it to say, they had to obey nature to command it in the sense of, leaving the earth and taking to the skies, right? They had to discover that mechanism and use it according to natural laws. They didn't create a new law. They followed the rules to gain this ability of flight. So commitment to truth obviously matters for innovation. It obviously matters for evolution, as we talked about with the giraffe. Even your ability, this will probably blow some people's minds, your ability to tell a lie successfully also depends on the truth. And what I mean by that is if I tell you a lie and I say, I don't know, the sky is red, I am actually depending on your commitment to the truth for you to believe that lie, right? If you don't have a commitment to figuring out what is true, then how could I ever assume that you're going to believe my lie, right? There has to be this assumption on my part that you are actually trying to find the truth for me to be able to kind of intervene and insert something that's not true to get you to take it up as if it were true.
Well, something can only be a lie if a truth exists, right?
Exactly. And then by way of contrast, it's like if the truth doesn't exist, then what is a lie, right? It's a misrepresentation. What's the real representation?
Yes.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.